You're listening to the 14th Source for all geeky and nerdy news and discussion, which means that you're listening to a podcast.
For all intents and purposes.
I am Dee Bethel.
And I'm Andrew Asplund.
And we are your two overeducated, codependent nerd hosts, bringing you the things that we like to talk about, but filtered through inquisitive, and critical lenses.
Or so we say.
Wow.
For the episode, it's the episode for
Friday.
July 29th.
2022.
This is like, you tell, like, wow, why'd they stumble on the date? It's like, well, as it ends up, we're not recording on the normal day we record, so all the old tricks don't work.
Actually, I don't know what you're talking about. We are here with you, dear listeners, on Friday, January. Yeah, this is a live show. Mm-hmm. We don't edit at all.
So it's the end of July, 2022. You know, we don't need to say the usual, oh my gosh, we can't believe that 2022 is now 7/12 over. Although, wow, it is. It was San Diego Comic-Con this last week.
Like, it actually was a Comic-Con.
A Comic-Con, right? And, of course, you know, still holding out for the giant COVID, you know, spread the super spread that happened. But there was actually a lot of folks that showed up and talked about things that are coming out, kind of like the Comic-Cons of yore.
Yeah. They really leaned into announcements and surprises, and it was, despite seeing pictures of how crowded it was and how, you know, anxious that made me, it did kind of feel like it had a renewed vitality that showed itself through lots of announcements. Mostly what we're going to be talking about is movies and TV.
Right.
Because that's what it's become. Let's be real.
It's weird that a comic book convention is more dominated by not comic books. Yeah. So let's go ahead and get started, right? Let's talk about I think the big newsmaker, which was, at least, I mean, from what I saw. And one thing I want to start with is that, boy, oh boy, following the news of Comic-Con, I don't think I've ever felt like it's like trying to drink from a fire hose, because it's just like, oh, here's all this stuff, and you're kind of like, I can't keep up.
Right? Honestly, this is like, following this, I'm like, oh, this is just what Twitter feels like. Whenever I go on, I'm like, whoa, when you see a tweet and you're like, well, that seems like someone's taking a hot take. What are they talking about? And you just gotta scroll or do some hashtag searches just to find out what the hell is going on.
And I think for me, probably why I felt the most that way is I kind of forgot about Comic-Con, right? I don't even think of it. So suddenly I'm seeing social media just blowing up with like, here's a trailer for a new movie. I'm like, oh, okay, that looks cool. And then here's a trailer for another new movie. Here's a screenshot of Kevin Feige standing in front of a giant wall of movie titles, and you're like, wait, what's going on? Oh shit, it's San Diego Comic-Con.
Right.
So we're going to talk about that, and we're going to start with the big newsmaker. I already name dropped the old Kevin Feigster. No, never calling him that again. But Marvel Studios had a lot to say, and I think we've talked about it before, and I want to kind of say this, is that since the pandemic started, I feel like, you know, with their whole elaborate 30-year schedule basically fucked because of the pandemic, they had been playing a lot of release dates very close to the chest, right? You know, we had the first year of TV shows that we kind of knew about. Movies got delayed. And then suddenly it was like, you know, I think we talked about when Ms. Marvel came out, like it was like, here's the trailer, it comes out next month, you know. And that felt very much how they've been kind of running the studio, because it's like, I don't know, man, who's done?
Right. It seemed to be less about a plan and more like, what do we got? What's ready?
What's ready? Right. And one thing I'll say is that although there was a certain amount of that, there was also, like, Marvel they're trying to play the old game of like, here's a 3-year plan of nonsense.
Right.
So they did give us like the next 6 months kind of feeling good about what's coming out, where we have, you know, She-Hulk coming out on Disney Plus next month, of which they had a new trailer for that. We'll talk about that in a bit. They had a trailer for the new Black Panther, Wakanda Forever, which I believe is November of this year.
Right.
So they got that. That's okay. That's cool. And they talked a lot about Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, which comes out. They didn't have a trailer that's publicly released, but that's coming out like in February, right?
Right.
And that's, I think, the big, like, the next 6 months of Marvel stuff. I'm probably forgetting something, right? Some TV show, but
Yeah, I think the other thing, it's longer than 6 months, but Guardians 3 comes out in May.
Oh, okay. And there's more stuff going on past that, but I just like there was that kind of like, here's what's coming soon, you know, and of course the first one, which comes out in like 2 weeks, is She-Hulk, Attorney at Law, which, you know, we've talked about on and off, and you know, I always think like one of our earliest episodes talked about She-Hulk.
So good on them for going to that guy.
Which now, a follow-up to that, clearly someone should get him to do the She-Hulk show.
Yeah, I think we mentioned that on the show before, but yeah, that'd be...
And let's keep mentioning it until he does it.
David E. Kelly for She-Hulk. Yep, I think our first episode was about She-Hulk.
And you know, I've multiple times said that like I want a She-Hulk show that not only does She-Hulk but also focuses on the fact that she's an attorney, and that's what we're getting, right? We have a 2-minute trailer of what to expect with Jennifer Walters / She-Hulk, and to see what we're going to be seeing with this show.
What I like about it is that it could go either way, and it could go both ways. That's me hedging all bets.
Right.
But the idea that obviously we got a story to tell with Jennifer Walters. It's going to be an arc, but they could kind of set it up to be that ongoing legal comedy drama that you and I both wanted since we first
been wishing for years.
Right. So like, yes, we can have this arc, but honestly, if they just want to kind of keep the fun times going, they could. And it seems like they're going to, like, so they're creating that division for her, right?
Right.
Basically. Not for her, but, you know, with her in mind, to represent legally superheroes and supervillains. You could see them making multiple seasons out of this, and it's just fun, while also perhaps pushing along, you know, more, you know, focused stories for her. Whereas I think like WandaVision, that's kind of like a one and done thing, right? Because of the premise of that show.
Right. So this is a show, I think to follow up with what you're saying, this is a show that feels like it's not intended as a singular story. It does feel like they could set up an ongoing episodic show about She-Hulk and the weird ass legal shit she does while also doing She-Hulk stuff.
Right.
And you know, I gotta say, the new trailer, I had a lot of fun with it. I think we talked a bit about the previous one, and you know, I think we both were okay with it. We liked it, but the new one, it's got what I expected from She-Hulk. And the one thing I really want to comment on is they have a scene, at least one, definitively one, I think, but maybe 2 or 3, where the idea that she sort of breaks the fourth wall, and I say that because, you know, She-Hulk has always been this, she's not Deadpool, right? But she's always had a sort of meta-textual aspect to some of the stories. Like, so there's a scene where she literally turns to the camera and says something, but then even she's kind of like...
She's like, whoa.
Like, what?
What did I do?
And that, you know, for what they're doing, especially like a show where like they clearly say like it's kind of bananas. It's kind of bananas, right? There's kind of like, oh, there's superheroes everywhere. They're literally showing like just random people being superheroes. So it does feel like the kind of show where you have to have a moment where someone stops and says like, this is kind of silly.
Plus it gives them the opportunity to shine a spotlight on the underserved corner of the Marvel universe, which is superhero lawyers.
Right. Superhero lawyers. I mean, it's been, although it's worth mentioning, there's been one previously, and we hadn't heard much from him until Spider-Man Far From Home.
No Way Home.
Or No Way Home, whatever. Spider-Man 3.
There we go.
And Matt Murdock. Oh, okay, let's be honest. Who knows who the character at the end of the trailer was? But if that's not Daredevil, then they're just fucking with me, right?
I mean, that was me making that comment because of logic. Why? Who else could it be? And who would be more appropriate than the other prominent superhero Marvel lawyer? Right.
And I think one of the things that also leads into is they've now also made it clear that Matt Murdock and Daredevil are back in play. Right. You know, we already, in multiple instances, specifically, he's going to be featured in a new animated show, Spider-Man Freshman Year. At least the voice is a voice actor because it's an animated series. And he's also going to be featured in a show called Daredevil, subtitle, I forget.
Born Again,
an 18-episode series.
Right. Ostensibly, if the name is any indication, based on a very well-regarded storyline from Daredevil, written by Frank Miller, drawn by David Mazzucchelli. But I think Yeah, 18 episodes, way too long, but that's just us being old men.
Well, but if they're 25-minute episodes, that's still shorter than one Netflix season.
Indeed. If they're 25-minute episodes, it's kind of been hit and miss depending on the show. But I think the bigger news is, and I guess it's not surprising, or it could be, because Spider-Man 3 was a multiverse movie, Charlie Cox is returning.
Charlie Cox, and so is Vince D'Onofrio, which is not surprising because he'd already portrayed Kingpin in the MCU. And I guess it's really not surprising that Charlie Cox, because he'd also portrayed Matt Murdock in the MCU.
And I heard that D'Onofrio has also filmed some scenes for the upcoming Echo show, which makes sense. Mostly, I would assume, like flashbacks.
Right.
Stuff like that.
So with She-Hulk, what we're seeing is not only is it this new character that is sort of a legacy character because it's the new Hulk, and they're seeing that kind of a torch passing to a certain extent with Hulk, showing her how to be Hulk, but also her being her own character, which is this very silly attorney in this very silly law universe. Yeah. And then in that also reminding us and bringing in these other characters that we've seen and we've they were in the Martflix shows. I'm excited about that because I think She-Hulk looks good. I love Mark Ruffalo. Charlie Cox was great. Vince D'Onofrio was great. So like everything they gave me with the She-Hulk trailer checks with kind of like, I like what I'm seeing.
Right.
Right. It was a bit interesting. Not a spoiler for a trailer. Is that a thing?
Yeah, I know. I thought the same thing.
Is that the character Wang is also in She-Hulk? Because obviously I think he's turning into the bearer of bad news.
Right. He's also he's the Sorcerer Supreme.
He's the Sorcerer Supreme, and so in that regard, he is the guy who shows up and says, "Hey, by the way, there's a problem. It's a multiverse of madness."
Oh, you mean the other Benedict from the Doctor Strange movies?
It is Benedict.
Benedict Wong, yeah.
I forget that.
Yeah.
Anyway, but I let he's going to be part of it because they're also letting us know that we're leaning into heavy multiverse territory with they one of the things they said is that Marvel Phase 4 through 6 is the multiverse saga, which we kind of suspected, but now they're like, confirmed. Yeah. So I think I don't know. I just based on that one show trailer, I'm like, I'm into what's going on.
They talked a bit about, they showed a trailer for Black Panther, which is more of a teaser. Honestly, it didn't really show us much except for characters that were rumored to be or were confirmed to be, but now we actually see them in action.
Well, and I think there's two statements there. One is that they didn't really say much in the trailer, but they also revealed characters. I think the one that we all kind of knew, although I officially, technically, I don't think has been named, is Namor the Submariner. Played by an actor who's in Narcos. But anyway, he's playing this character of Namor. I guess he's the villain. We don't know. But the thing is, as you said, this trailer didn't really. Right, all we know is that Chadwick Boseman is dead, so therefore the character of T'Challa is dead. And then it's like, and let me show you all the other people that were in the previous movie. Who's gonna be the person? Who knows, right? We have no knowledge of what this movie's about other than it features Namor. And
didn't we get a taste? Oh, that's the wrong way to say it. Didn't we get a look at Ironheart in that trailer as well?
I don't know if she was in the trailer, and so that's another thing where the actress that's playing Ironheart, Riri Williams, is the character. She is credited in the movie, and I had not heard of that. I guess that was announced, but whether she was in the trailer, I don't. Honestly, there's so much going on in that trailer. I'm not really sure.
Yeah. There's some busy trailers that were released.
Some busy trailers, but it's.
maybe I thought I saw Ironheart in the Dungeons and Dragons trailer. I don't know. It's all busy.
There's a lot going on, but finally that movie's coming out. I know there'd been a lot of talk about that movie where there's some complications with some COVID stuff and everything else, but I think the interesting thing is that it's coming out and we don't really know. Yeah. This idea that we have a movie coming out where basically the main character, the actor that played the main character, died, and they never said officially what that's going to mean, other than we're not going to replace that actor. So like it's weird to see a trailer where you don't know who's the main character.
Right. And that's actually a conversation not for this episode, but one I've seen people having about what's wrong with just recasting T'Challa. I don't know how I feel about it, but it's something maybe to come back to at a later time. I may bring some people on to talk about it even, because that's something they have. Well, they've done it at least once.
They've done it at least once. Yeah.
Yeah, with Rhodey, right?
Yeah, Don Cheadle certainly was not in the first Iron Man movie.
Right? The first victim of the snap, I guess. Kevin Feige's snap.
Snapped and some other guy showed up instead. Wild, right? And I think there's actually, there's a few other like lesser, not characters you normally recognize, but yeah, there's been other people as well. Oh, Mark Ruffalo. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's right.
Shit. Technically recast twice if you want to go all the way back to the Marvel
MCU,
yeah.
I think officially though, from Norton to Ruffalo, I think is the official.
That counts. Yeah.
I think the only other thing that stands out from the Marvel announcements is going into Phase 6.
Phase 6. 2
Avengers movies, and that's to be released within 6 months of each other
in 2025.
Yes. My God, that is so far away. The names don't insinuate direct connection, but we have the first one is the Kang Dynasty. The second one is Secret Wars. Mm-hmm. It all speaks to, as you mentioned at the top of this multiverse saga that they're setting up.
Which we've already seen a little bit of the front loading of that.
Indeed, yeah. And like we talked about before, I think when we talked about Ms. Marvel, Phase 4 really feels like, to me, a lot like Phase 1. They're just raising the buildings that were blown up and creating a new foundation for what's to come. That being said, Phase 5, the next one that's coming, does look a little, based on what we're seeing here, disjointed. I kind of wonder how they're going to be connecting things. But if it's any indication, like I said, being called the multiverse saga that they're entering, they're giving themselves some leeway to be kind of all over the place.
Right.
To come together, I'm guessing, in Phase 6.
And one thing I will say that throughout the last year or two, we'd seen all the Disney Plus shows, which were kind of the bulk of what they were doing, although we also had Black Widow and Shang-Chi. But one of the things I feel like we definitely saw what felt like 2 different kind of narrative pushes of what they were doing. One was this multiversal stuff with Loki, to an extent WandaVision, going into Doctor Strange. And then we also had the stuff that was exactly the opposite of that. It was just like this conventional, just bad guys stuff. Black Widow, Captain America and the Winter Soldier, or I'm sorry, Falcon and the Winter Soldier. And I think what we've seen is, in fact, that there were 2 different things going on, because as a lot of people have talked about, one of the movies they did announce was the Thunderbolts movie. Right. Which is like a direct, kid, progeny, whatever, of what we were seeing on those not multiversal things. And of course, everything else is big multiverse nonsense. So they're kind of throwing stuff up in the air, and we'll see how it works out. For me, I think the biggest surprise is how much more predominant television is. I mean, we knew it was happening, but like it feels like every other thing they talked about or that they showed on their thing was a TV show. There's a show every 3 months, right? And a movie, maybe every 3 to 6. Like there's a lot more shows that are doing the lifting of their story, I guess. Oh, Loki season 2, you know.
It seems like they're kind of following the Paramount Plus Star Trek model of just like, yo, this is the year of Marvel, whatever, right? And they're just gonna, because what's Paramount Plus's sort of their mantra is like 52 straight weeks or something like that of new Star Trek, right?
Or at least like 30 weeks, and then then we forget for a couple of weeks. Yeah,
which leads us to some other announcements.
Star Trek?
No, so Star Wars is no.
Actually, I don't think
there were any Star Wars announcements.
I know that there's I saw a trailer. It may be old for the new Andor series, which comes out soon, but that's the only thing I know about that's on the horizon. So moving on, Star Trek also had stuff to talk about. This is, we talk about Star Trek all the time. Now that you're turning into a Star Trek nerd, there wasn't really anything particularly new, right? A lot of what we already knew was coming. Picard season 2 or 3, Lower Deck season 3, Strange New World season 2, Discovery. I didn't see anything about Discovery season 5, because I think that's kind of farther out. But there was another teaser for Picard Season 3, which featured all of the actors that they'd announced in costume and makeup. You get to see kind of what they look like, what to expect. See a bunch of old people gearing up for it. I mean, I'm not complaining. I realized I watched Star Trek's 1 through 6, which ended up being a lot of old people by the end of it. Right. But it is interesting to see, like, oh yeah, man, they dug up all these folks, Gates McFadden, Michael Dorn.
Is the subtitle for this season Star Trek Picard -AARP?
Stop talking about Captain Picard's colon.
I'll do what I want.
They did, they had that trailer, and so we now kind of have, I think it's already been confirmed, the cast for the show. It's, a lot of these original Next Generation actors, plus 2 of the actors that had previously been in Picard. Interestingly enough, 3 of the actors that had been in season 1 and 2 are basically no longer in the show. It was kind of a, like, okay, this is now the TNG show. Which is, I think what people want.
Yeah.
So that's coming, and they've made it very clear that this is the end of that story, which is good because Patrick Stewart is very old. Right.
Give this guy a break.
Like, let the guy just retire.
Let him just hang out with his. Is this his spouse, his girlfriend?
His spouse, yeah, they're his wife.
Spend his weekends with Ian McKellen and just posting to Instagram, for Christ's sakes.
Yeah, just let them, sit and be old together.
Greatest bromance.
So there's not a lot of news there other than they say, yeah, it's coming.
Those cast pictures, yeah.
Which those cast pictures were kind of like, to see, these people, like, we'd already seen Marina Sirtis and Jonathan Frakes, right? Because they were Picard season 1. But just to see these other people, like, oh wow, look at them, they dusted off, and LeVar Burton still looks great. Actually, that's the one thing I thought. I was like, wow, LeVar Burton still looks great. Everyone else is looking a little older, but LeVar Burton's like, no,
he's like, and I got new eyes.
Yeah, he's got reading rainbow magic right there, or Sacramento magic. Who knows?
That's right. Yeah. I actually skipped over Worf because I'm like, because he looks so distinguished. I'm like, oh, look at you, my dude. And I thought I saw someone put his head from that poster onto the torso, onto a mid shot of the classic commercial "Most Interesting Man in the World." I'm like, yeah, that works. Stay across you, my friends.
Yeah. So that's fun. I don't think there's anything exciting or strange there other than just the hype.
For us, there was one announcement that we're both nerded out for.
So they had the cast of Strange New Worlds there, talking about because they'd finished filming season 2 only a couple weeks ago, right? 3 or 4 weeks, I think, and they were kind of talking about what to expect, and they had, for lack of a better word, intruders come in to their panel. 2 actors by the name of Tawny Newsome and Jack Quaid, who are from the series Lower Decks. And Jack Quaid said, like, okay, let me be the one to tell you, we're going to be in a crossover episode.
It's Boimler time.
It's so apparently Strange New World season 2 does feature an episode with the character Beckett Mariner and Bradward Boimler. And I'll tell you, that announcement is Dan and I have had a number of texts about this because it's like, what? Right. How do you have a crossover with an animated show and a live action show, one which is a comedy and one which is serious?
So I've heard conflicting reports. I think it's just people reading into it through their own analytical lens. So I've seen, I think it was on Nerdist, I saw that episode of Strange New Worlds was partially animated. You and I discussed about maybe those 2 characters because they are so kind of perfect for their roles, both in live action and animated, could actually appear in person.
Well, and it's worth mentioning that they had previously been at a convention dressed as their characters.
Right.
And Jack Quaid did make the comment that they would be live action, except he said, but with purple hair and more red, as he pointed to his torso. We believe he meant uniform and not, like blood, but you never know with Lower Decks characters. So there are a lot of conflicting reports, I think.
The best part is to wait and see.
Yeah. The one thing I will say is everything I see about the Star Trek panels and groups is that it just seems like a lot of people that really like working with each other.
Yeah.
Right? Like they kind of, and maybe that's all acting, they're putting on a show, but that's always the thing I think about is, they always talk about how the Next Generation, the cast got along really well.
Yeah.
To the point where it was like they were kind of hard to work with for some like professional staff because like you guys are all goof offs. and how not every show necessarily had that same dynamic, although I hear a lot of the new shows definitely have more of that. So it's nice to see that they seem to get along. Like the idea that these two wackos from the animated show would show up and everyone's like, yeah, let's do it thing,
I think that episode of Strange New Worlds is also going to be directed by Jonathan Frakes.
It is.
Yeah.
It is by everyone's favorite space daddy. I mean, because Jonathan Frakes, for those who don't know, he played Commander Riker, and he's a big director. He's considered a very good director. He does a lot of TV, some film. I mean, I think his big motion picture debut was Star Trek: First Contact. But he's done a lot of Star Trek, and he does a lot of Star Trek. He works mostly with Discovery actually, and a little bit with Picard. So he's done. If you watch the Ready Room with Will Wheaton, he comes on quite a bit to talk about his work on Discovery and Picard, and he actually even talks about that relationship with the cast and how he actually describes the Discovery cast is like the TNG cast, where they're all like familial almost.
Oh, cool, yeah.
But yeah, he's in it, and who knows? Maybe he'll play Commander Riker. You never know, right?
You never know.
It was a bit of it's a weird announcement, and we'll see what amounts to it next year when those shows come out. But I think it also did. It's worth mentioning that they also have a trailer for Lower Decks season 3, which airs next month. Starts airing next month.
Nice.
That Lower Decks trailer, the end of it is just, it's the kind of joke that Andrew loves, where they make fun of the opening credits of Deep Space Nine. But it's so we'll have more Star Trek coming soon. Like I said, not a lot of they didn't unload a lot of big Star Trek stuff. But there was enough there to be like, let's talk about it because it's fun, and it seems like they had a good time talking about Star Trek.
All the stuff we just covered are things that for me or for our show at the very least seemed worth talking about. DC did some stuff. I think the most interesting thing that came out for us was the Shazam Shazam Fury of the Gods trailer.
Right. I mean, it's I'll say is Shazam is still my favorite DCU movie, just because it was, of all the grimdarks, it was the one that's like, no, let's be upbeat and about family. Like, okay.
The other big news from DC was from a panel led by Jim Lee, the co-publisher and I guess chief creative officer of the DC world, both comics and movies, I guess, is that he was doing a Q&A and someone asked if there are any plans to bring Zack Snyder back. He said nope. So there's that. Yeah. Sorry, all Snyder heads.
Yeah, I mean, release the Snyder cut. Well, he got cut all right.
From the payroll.
Now, as you already mentioned, there was one other trailer that came out that was a bit hot on the internet, which was the Dungeons and Dragons movie, Honor Among Thieves.
Oh, jeez. Yeah.
Starring Chris Pine as... Sorry, I was just thinking of the comical tweet where they revealed all the characters' name and it said, "Oh, Chris Pine is edging the bard," and I'm sorry, he's doing what to the bard?
Yeah, he's doing what?
I think it might be Edgin the bard, but anyway, but it's a story. It's a Dungeons and Dragons story set in the Forgotten Realms, focused around Neverwinter and the Sword Coast. The reason I want to mention it is because it's interesting that a lot of people are very excited about it, right? They watch the trailer and they see like iconic D&D stuff, like a gelatinous cube, a displacer beast, an owl bear, a mimic, and they're like, yes, this is the Dungeons and Dragons I want to see. And whereas I think my takeaway was, why do they have this stupid D&D shit, And they don't really say much about what the movie's about, like the story. In fact, I didn't realize it was set in the Forgotten Realms on the Sword Coast until after the fact, when I saw the characters' names and they revealed that Hugh Grant plays the new Lord of Neverwinter. For me, as like the one of 7 people that cares about that fiction, because I played a long-running game of D&D set there, I was like, oh, I'm interested in that. But that trailer didn't tell me that. The trailer was like, no, let me show you the stuff you don't like, Andrew.
I think you brought up a good point, because I had a question of like, is this what do D&D fans want, a narrative with pre-existing characters, because like it seems like the goal or the purpose of D&D is to make up your own character and have your own adventures. Put yourself into the adventure, and then you brought up the good point, like, well, then Critical Role wouldn't be super popular. Like,
and there wouldn't be a whole 100 Forgotten Realms novels, right?
Right. That being said, the tone, I wondered, is that what the D&D community kind of wants? Because it really came across as like, it's not self-serious, which I guess could be a good thing. It kind of looked like it wanted to be, in terms of tone, like the Suicide Squad or the Guardians of the Galaxy. Like it wanted to be a James Gunn movie.
Yes. No, that's actually, I think that's a fair point. And, people like to joke about the 2000 Dungeons & Dragons movie, which tried to take itself much more seriously and is generally considered a disaster. I don't know. I did see some people talk about the idea of just making a heist movie. Is kind of like it's hard to go wrong with that, right? So like, okay, how do we...
Where they go in and lift Pathfinder art for their poster?
Well, it's honor among thieves, man. We'll get to that because that's actually my favorite oopsie. Because the problem with like role-playing games, even Dungeons & Dragons, which has these established settings and stuff, is that anyone that plays it, or even the books and the fiction, they can be different, right? Some can be very serious, and some can be, there's gothic horror, there's super serious drama, there's some more kind of silly stuff. So you kind of like, you find what works, right? I would say that in that regard, going for something that's, again, more like, looks like a silly heist movie is probably a better way to inject Dungeons and Dragons into the, like, because it's clear they want to have a D&D CU, right? Okay. They've been pushing this multiversal stuff in the game for a while. Like, they want to have a big world that they can make content for, right? That people can consume.
And doing a multimodal approach in terms of entertainment.
Right. And they must have been looking, you mentioned Critical Role, right? People have been watching people play D&D for years. It's like, well, okay, why don't we just... And there's always that scale of how prepared, how pre-scripted is it? It's like, well, what if we just went all the way pre-scripted? It just made a movie. And they're finally like, yeah, they could probably do that, right? I mean, Critical Role has a TV show, the animated show, right? It's clear people want that content.
I remember, like, Acquisitions Incorporated even got, like, its own gaming modules and stuff like that. Like,
so at this point, it's, the characters that they're presenting, no one in the trailer is like an existing character, right? So it's all new characters. Okay. So there's no, like, you don't have to have like hundreds of years.
It's even a new Lord of Neverwinter.
Yeah, it's a new Hugh Grant replaces the old guy, right? You don't need to know who the old guy was. But it's the idea. So it's a starting point for you to start your adventure into the D&D multiverse. That's what it seems like to me, is they want to create a multimodal property, and this is their big step. They have comic books, they have novels, but this is like, can we make it $1 billion industry like these other guys? I mean, they got Chris Pine is, they got a cast of characters that look fun.
Well, you can't trust the projects he signs off
on. But and Hugh Grant, like, I always forget, like, oh, he's still doing things.
I don't know. That really sounds like a Nick Cage thing. It's like, well, I accidentally bought a car I couldn't afford.
Well, they did. Apparently, they had an interview where he talked about, well, I've been a really successful dungeon master for a long time, and then he revealed, but I've never played Dungeons and Dragons before. You're like, oh, right, Mr. Grant.
Still charming.
But you mentioned by the way, if you want to like drain your brain, just go on Twitter and Google the D&D movie and see some of the absurd commentaries about people who are like, that's not per the rules. And I mean, it's just like, wow, guys.
But the chaos of that movie, I would not be surprised if like a gigantic D20 showed up out of the sky and rolled a natural 1.
Right.
Or something like that.
I'm still hoping that movie ends with like the pan out and it's just the 5 of them sitting around a table.
Like the Lego movie.
Right. Just like Chris Pine being like, man, this was great. We should do it again next week. And then you find out Hugh Grant's actually the game master, But
okay, I'm back on board.
I mean, that was just like, it's just a throwaway thing at the end, like but no, there's a lot of that of people saying that, like, oh, this thing here is dumb, like whatever. But the one thing you mentioned, the poster, they had a poster at something tavern that they'd set up, like an event space,
right?
Which was ostensibly it was a movie poster for the movie. I believe most people, the conclusion, it was done by Boss Logic.
Yeah, very popular kind of kit bash poster maker.
How appropriate. He bashed that quick.
No, he's known for making what look like professional quality posters just as fan art, and it's created because he gets. I'm not saying he's not a talented artist. He obviously is, but taking photos of actors and making them look like, putting them in costumes as characters and he's so good that studios now hire him. Mm-hmm. But go on, sorry.
Well, and of course, people saw this poster and somebody noticed, because it was an ampersand, like the D&D logo, with monsters from D&D filling out the ampersand, or at least monsters that might be from D&D. One of them, people noticed, like, oh, that monster looks like it's from D&D, but that picture's from Pathfinder. Mm-hmm. And people say, oh, look, it's Pathfinder 2nd edition, Bestiary 1 or 2, mm-hmm. I forget. There's the image. You can see it. It's right there. I mean, I love this kind of stupid copyright stuff, right? It's mm-hmm. because, of course, every dipshit on the internet suddenly is an expert on intellectual property law. So, like, everyone's right. Kind of. But it was this kind of thing where, like, that got people noticed that, and then I'm pretty confident that poster has been kind of disappeared.
Yeah, was probably what will happen. But I would love the idea of them just going like, we already made a bunch of them. Let's just license it from Paizo.
Let's pay Paizo a couple bucks for this poster.
Yeah. Special thanks to Paizo in the end credits. Sorry.
there's a fun conversation there about like, well, wait a second, but isn't that something? Isn't it a D&D monster? It's like, well, this is complicated.
Turns out the monster is rampant capitalism.
Really, that's the real takeaway. But yeah, so new D&D movie. I don't actually know the release date for that, but it's coming out, I think, next year sometime. Mm-hmm. It'll probably be fun, or not. Again, Jeremy Irons probably has some comments to make about D&D movies since he was the villain of the first one.
I mean, he did, from what I heard, he actually called Hugh Grant and gave him some advice. It was weird. He sang it. He just said simply, "Be prepared." So if you, dear listeners, have any thoughts about the topics we discussed this week, feel free to leave your thoughts as comments on the page for this episode at forallintents.net.
You can also post your comments or engage in conversations with other listeners on our Facebook page.
You can find us on other social media as well, such as Twitter and Instagram. On Twitter, you can find us our respective handles, which means you can find Andrew tweeting about tabletop role-playing game at Profound Dark, and you can find me at dbethel. You can also find us on Instagram, where you can find Andrew at Profound Brick, and me and my work at dbethel Comics.
While you're at our website at forallintents.net, you can also take a look at our YouTube page, which you can find by clicking on the link in the corner that says YouTube, or you may already be there because you're listening to our show as it's being broadcast on YouTube. If you're there, please feel free to like and subscribe, as the kids like to say, ring the bell.
We use 2 tracks of music for our show. One is called Disco Medusi, the other is called District 4. They're both written and performed by Kevin MacLeod of the Clan MacLeod, immortal swordsman, graph paper enthusiast, and musician extraordinaire.
You can find his music at incompetech.filmmusic.io, and that's all licensed under the Creative Commons 4.0 attribution license.
If you like the show and like to help us out, the best way to do so would be to subscribe to the show using whichever podcasting service you happen to use. What would help us out even more would be to go to their storefront and leaving some sort of review. Whether a text review or using their proprietary metric will help spread the word to new potential listeners through the magic of algorithms. It's been a week of announcements and generating hype and excitement for what's to come for nerds, but unfortunately we have to end on a bit of a downer, although I think it's of it more as a celebration of what has come and how much was accomplished, because, dear listeners, David Warner has passed away.
Film and television actor.
I think you said it best in a text conversation. You feel like every generation of nerd every nerd has like a reference point, because there's no like one standout role he's ever played. It was just like he's had standout roles spread throughout everything, every type of media that surely you have come across. I bet we know what that was for you, Andrew.
Star Trek, obviously.
Which one? Because he was in Star Trek a couple times, wasn't he?
He was. I mean, obviously, like, we just do them in order: Star Trek 5, Star Trek 6, Star Trek TNG. But I think, his performance in Star Trek 6 as Chancellor Gorkon, and his performance as Gul Madred in Star Trek The Next Generation Chain of Command Part 2 are probably the ones I think most of.
Yeah.
St. John Talbot from Star Trek 5. Oof, if we could just give a pass to that movie.
I have 2 reference points for him, and the thing is, one of them wasn't even him. I was kind of exposed to him through Transformers because the character Shockwave was a sound-alike. I think they wanted David Warner, and he said no, so they just hired someone to do David Warner's voice, because it's a very unique and standout timbre, right? But I think I probably was first aware. I can't remember which I saw first, and I know one came out long before, but I don't remember what order I saw them in. It was either his role as a scientist in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2: The Secret of the Ooze, or Tron, right?
Tron,
but
that's another good one.
I have a stronger memory of him from TMNT 2 than Tron. So even if I saw Tron first, I know I saw TMNT 2 a lot, because I had to watch it over and over again to make sure it was as bad as it seemed.
But I think, like, just to give context why I say that he's a guy that a lot of people have different connections to, right? He was in the film Time Bandits as the Supreme Evil. He was in the Batman animated series as Ra's al Ghul. He was, like I said, in 3 Star Trek appearances. He was also the voice of the villain in Baldur's Gate 2.
You're right.
He was also in... I think he played Ra's al Ghul in all the animated shows.
Even Batman Beyond, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he also was... For Big Finish, he voiced like an alternate universe Doctor Who.
He's surely been on Doctor Who.
He was also in Doctor Who in the Matt Smith era, I believe.
Oh, you're right. Yeah,
he was a janitor on a submarine.
Right. That's right.
Like the most random role ever. But I mean, he has so many things he's been in where, like, some people, people talk about Tim Curry, that, like, as an actor, like, oh, Tim Curry, like, depending on what you know him from, says a lot about you. But David Warner's like, we all could just be like, I remember him in this thing, and you're like, oh shit, he was in that too.
The other Tim Curry.
But yeah, so he passed away this week, and it was. I guess, I mean, he was old. I think in his 80s. It was just kind of like, oh.
Obviously, a death is sad, but we can't say that it was a wasted life in any shape or form. He gave us a lot. And it's clear, I would guess, from the variety of roles he played, and as you point out, the variety of mediums he participated in, he had a lot of fun doing it. So I declare his life a success. Thank you, David Warner.
Yeah.
So until you figure out what you know David Warner from, dear listeners, I'm D. Bethel.
And I'm Andrew Asplund.
And for all intents and purposes,
that was a podcast. I don't know. Which of those do you want to do? What do you want to do?
I guess there's that warrant, intelligent discussion.
No, but we're also not intelligent, right? There's a whole plan going out to 2005 or 2025.
2005. Right? That's wow.
Yeah,
they're wrapping around. It's
the time war, right?
I like what Kyron did on Facebook. He's like, hey everybody, I'm gonna be here for comic, and put like a Google Map shot, and it was just his neighborhood in Sacramento.
Yeah, come see me if you're in the area.
Yeah, right. Buy my books, TaurusComics.com.